No one walks out of the cursed mine alive. They walk out hungry, changed, and no longer human. In a small town in Oregon, a man named Frank Weaver and his son Aiden Weaver are heading to an abandoned mine. Frank tells Aiden to wait outside while he goes inside with one of his friends to retrieve some items. When Frank enters the mine with his friend to collect the belongings, they are suddenly startled by a mysterious sound. Feeling curious, Frank and his friend begin to explore the mine tunnels, and suddenly a creature attacks Frank.
Fuck out of here.
Aiden, worried because his father has not come out, slowly enters the mine as well. He too is suddenly attacked by the creature, and the story begins. The scene then shifts to a teacher named Julia Meadows, who is teaching at a school. One of her students is Lucas Weaver, Frank's older son. In class, Lucas looks gloomy and keeps drawing something on a piece of paper. We don't know exactly what he is drawing, but his expression clearly shows sadness and unhappiness.
Example of a,
After school, Lucas gets pranked by one of his classmates named Clint Owens, who puts a creepy doll inside Lucas's bag. Lucas realizes it was Clint's doing. Lucas then goes to a lake where he sees a skunk. He kills the animal and brings it home. He approaches a door secured with many padlocks. We still don't know what's inside that room. Lucas then takes a family photo showing him with his family. Looking at the photo reminds him of memories with his loved ones, and he misses his mother, who passed away when he was very young. The next day at school, Julia asks Lucas to tell a legend or fable. Lucas shares a story about a bear family in which the father suddenly turns into a cannibal and eats his entire family.
Big Bear's sickness had gotten worse.
After school, when Clint opens his bag, he is shocked to find animal droppings inside. Angry, knowing Lucas must have done it, Clint confronts him and they fight, leading both of them to be taken to the principal's office. Julia, as Lucas's teacher, grows increasingly curious about his strange behavior. Every day she sees him withdrawn and unmotivated to learn. Therefore, Julia checks Lucas's files in the teacher's room and notes his home address, as well as the names of his father and younger brother. After gathering information about Lucas's family, Julia Meadows begins following him wherever he goes. Eventually, she sees Lucas wanting to buy ice cream, so she buys it for him. While eating, they talk. Julia asks about his family, including his younger brother Aiden and his father, Frank. Lucas tells her his mother died when he was very young, and that Aiden and Frank are currently at home. Once they finish the ice cream, Lucas politely asks her to stop following him.
I gotta go.
Instead of going home, he once again searches for wild animals. Meanwhile, Julia heads to Lucas's house. From outside, the house looks silent and almost abandoned. She tries the front door and hears a loud noise coming from inside. Feeling scared and knowing she has no permission to enter, she decides to leave. Julia then tells her brother Paul Meadows, a police officer, about the strange situation she noticed at Lucas's house. Paul becomes angry, reminding her she has no right to enter someone else's property, and warns her not to do it again.
To find Frank dead with the needle.
That night, when Lucas comes home, he cuts up the wild animal he found earlier. He brings the meat to the heavily padlocked room. Inside are Frank and Aiden, who have transformed into frightening figures. It is revealed that after they were attacked by the creature in the mine, both initially seemed fine, but Frank's condition deteriorated rapidly while Aiden remained mostly normal. Realizing something was terribly wrong inside him, Frank demanded his sons lock him away with multiple padlocks, warning them never to open the door. But missing their father, they eventually opened it and saw Frank in a terrifying state. He became violent and dragged Aiden into the room with him, forcing both of them to stay confined. Lucas is too afraid to approach Frank directly, so he decides to hunt animals and feed Frank with raw meat. Eating the meat calms Frank, so Lucas continues this routine daily. After feeding Frank, he always retreats to his room and tries to rest. The next day at school, Julia files a concern to a counselor named Ellen Booth, showing her disturbing drawings found under Lucas's desk, images full of terrifying creatures. Julia asks Ellen to visit Lucas's home to check on his well-being. Ellen agrees to stop by.
Plenty of students that are homeschooled.
Later, after Julia leaves for shopping, Ellen heads straight to the Weaver house. When she arrives, the place looks empty, but she bravely steps inside. She smells a horrible odor lingering through the home and hears a loud noise coming from the locked room, the one where Frank and Aiden are being held. Driven by curiosity and unaware of the danger, she opens the door. Suddenly, Frank violently attacks her, killing her. After consuming part of her remains, Frank begins to mutate further into an even more monstrous form. Meanwhile, Lucas Weaver is setting animal traps in the forest when he accidentally sees a hunter named Warren Stokes discovering a human corpse. Warren immediately reports it to Paul Meadows. Julia happens to be passing by and asks Paul what they're talking about. Paul explains that Warren found a human body in the woods. Paul and his team go to the location Warren pointed out, and once they find the body, it is taken to the hospital for autopsy. A doctor named John examines the remains and says the condition is horrifying, not caused by wild animals, but by a human. This is proven when he finds human teeth embedded in the victim's flesh. The case is extremely puzzling. They cannot understand how someone could brutally mutilate another person like that. Paul and the other officers return to the forest to conduct a further investigation. There, they discover an old, abandoned mine. Just as they are about to explore it, Paul receives a call from headquarters informing him that Ellen Booth has been reported missing. Her husband has been calling repeatedly, but she never answered. Police officially declare her disappearance suspicious. Paul and the others are forced to halt their investigation and return to the station. Meanwhile, as Lucas walks home, Clint Owens suddenly stops him and refuses to let him pass. In that tense moment, both boys are startled when a terrifying mutated creature, Frank Weaver, appears. Frank savagely attacks Clint, tearing him apart, while Lucas runs home in panic. When Lucas arrives, he sees a car parked in front of his house. He rushes to check the locked room, but Frank and Aiden have escaped through the door that was left open. Lucas hides Ellen's car so that nobody will know she was there. Night falls, and Paul informs Julia that Ellen has mysteriously disappeared. Julia remembers that she sent Ellen to Lucas's house, and she begins to suspect Ellen vanished after going there. She urges Paul to check Lucas's home for clues. Paul and a colleague search around the property but see no sign of anyone present. They can't legally search inside without a warrant.
Sheriff Meadows!
Frank!
The next morning, Paul requests authorization to investigate the Weaver home, as he also feels something is very wrong. Lucas's house appears incredibly neglected and lifeless, but before they can move forward, they receive another distressing report. Clint's parents tell the police that Clint never came home. They file a report that their son has mysteriously gone missing as well. The disappearance of multiple people leaves Paul Meadows and the other officers confused and overwhelmed. Since Paul must wait for a search warrant to investigate Lucas's house, Julia takes matters into her own hands and rushes there without informing her brother. When she arrives, she becomes puzzled by a car covered with a tarp. She didn't see it there the previous day. Julia lifts the tarp and is shocked to discover that the vehicle belongs to Ellen Booth. She immediately calls Paul and urges him to come to the Weaver house right away. Paul and the police then search the property, where they find Ellen's mutilated body. Although the body is in terrible condition, they can still identify it as hers. They also find another corpse too damaged to recognize. Its face, limbs, and body are destroyed. They conclude it is most likely Frank Weaver. However, there is still no sign of Aiden. Shortly after, Lucas returns home and panics when he sees police everywhere. Julia comforts him and takes him to the hospital. A doctor reveals Lucas is severely dehydrated and malnourished, recommending he be cared for at the hospital for now. With no family left to look after him, Julia decides she will care for Lucas until he is old enough to live on his own.
What did you just say to me?
Julia and Paul then meet Warren Stokes again. Based on his research and knowledge, Warren believes the murders in the area are likely the work of a Wendigo, a legendary cannibalistic spirit that consumes the flesh of both animals and humans. He explains that the Wendigo can mark its host, and once marked, the spirit can move between bodies. A Wendigo can only be killed when it is weakened. Paul asks what the connection is between Frank's family and the Wendigo. Warren explains that Frank must have become the Wendigo after entering the abandoned mine. Paul is skeptical and dismisses it as superstition. Paul and Julia head back, but during the drive, Paul receives news from his team. They have discovered a body believed to be Clint Owens.
What? What happened?
Paul and Julia rush to the scene. Unable to bear any more deaths, Julia Meadows asks Paul Meadows to take her to the hospital because she wants to bring Lucas Weaver home.
Some mythological...
Lucas's brother, where's he?
After dropping them off, Paul instructs one of his colleagues, Dan, to stay and protect Julia and Lucas, while Paul returns to the site where Clint Owens' body was found. After Paul leaves, Lucas explains that his father and brother are sick and turned dangerous after being attacked by a mysterious creature in the mine. Since then, Frank Weaver became aggressive. Lucas knew Frank craved meat, so he fed him animals every day to keep him calm and prevent attacks. Suddenly, a loud roar echoes nearby.
He's here.
Lucas tells Julia that it is Frank searching for him. Frightened, Julia hides with Lucas. Dan, who is guarding them, becomes alert and approaches a nearby shed. Before entering, he radios Paul, telling him something is wrong at Julia's house. Paul immediately turns back. Dan slowly investigates the shed and sees Aiden Weaver emerging from a box. Then from behind, the monstrous Frank stabs Dan, killing him instantly. Moments later, Paul arrives and discovers his partner brutally murdered. Paul is then attacked by Frank and knocked unconscious. Meanwhile, Lucas slips out of the house, worrying Julia, who searches frantically for him. Instead, she finds the injured Paul in the shed. Remembering Lucas's story about the mine attack, Julia becomes convinced Frank has taken Lucas and Aiden back to the mine. She brings Paul along as backup. At the mine, Julia rushes inside and finds Lucas with Aiden.
Lucas?
Lucas begs her to leave before Frank arrives because the creature will kill her. Julia refuses to abandon him and fires several shots at Frank, but they have no effect. She then ignites a flare, discovering that bright light and heat weaken Frank. Using this advantage, she stabs the creature in the chest. Lucas joins the fight, striking Frank at his weakest point, forcing the monster to collapse. Knowing it's still alive, Julia destroys the creature's heart. But instead of dying completely, the Wendigo spirit transfers into Aiden, who had already been marked as its next host. With no other choice and to prevent further transformation, Julia is forced to kill Aiden. Lucas at first cannot accept losing his brother, but he eventually understands and allows Julia to end Aiden's suffering. In the final scene, Julia and Paul are seen taking Lucas to a peaceful lake. Lucas relaxes by the water, as Julia promises Paul she will take care of Lucas until he grows up. Suddenly, Paul begins coughing violently, strange fluids leaking from his mouth and eyes. It becomes clear that during his encounter with the creature, Paul was unknowingly marked by the Wendigo. Soon, he will become its new host, another transformation waiting to happen, and the story ends.